This is Bloomberg Quicktake. I'm Scarlett Fu. The White House has officially confirmed that the U.S. is staging a diplomatic boycott against the upcoming 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the athletes of Team USA have, quote, our full support, but there will be no diplomatic or official representation at the Games. So what does this mean? Why does it matter? Let's bring in Dr. Jules Boycott. He is professor of politics and government at Pacific University in Oregon. He's also author of 4 books on the Olympic Games, including Power Games, a political history of the Olympics. Professor Boycott, thank you so much for speaking with us. So U.S. athletes would still be able to attend and compete in the Olympics. What exactly would a diplomatic boycott then accomplish?
So a diplomatic boycott would be a strong signal to both China and the international community that the U.S. government will stand up against crimes against humanity. That is what human rights organizations have been calling what's happening in Xinjiang province at the moment. And so it'll be powerfully symbolic to stand up against that kind of thing happening. It'll be interesting to see also whether this makes other countries join, and the allies of the United States might also get on board with this. So that'll be interesting to see in the days that come.
And to be clear, we made certain that this is not an athlete boycott. What would turn this into an economic boycott?
Well, you'd have to have a lot more economic power to have an economic boycott of China in general. The United States is incredibly reliant on China. China owns a lot of the U.S. debt, and so that would be an entirely different ballgame. The reason why they're going with a diplomatic boycott is because it speaks against the possibility of sports washing. This is a term we see a lot in the news these days. Sports washing is essentially when a country uses a sports mega event like the Olympics or the World Cup of soccer to try to launder its reputation on the world stage. And by not sending diplomats to the Beijing Olympics, that means that the United States is trying to deprive China of the possibility of sports washing. All those grin and grip photo ops that are typical within Olympic Games won't be happening, at least not with diplomats from the United States and possibly their allies.
Okay, so it would deprive China of that photo finish moment where there's lots of pictures, a lot of pageantry, because the people that it wants to impress simply won't be there attending the actual games. China's take on all this, Professor, is that Beijing apparently had no plan of inviting U.S. politicians to the games. So how can there be a boycott of an event that they were not invited to attend?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to follow the back and forth. Chinese officials have also said that the United States doing a diplomatic boycott violates the spirit of the Olympic Charter. Well, a lot of things violate the spirit of the Olympic Charter, including carrying out human rights abuses against your own population. So the war of words will definitely be continuing for the next couple months in the lead up to the Beijing Games.
Right. You talked about the crimes against humanity and other human rights abuses, specifically what we've seen in Xinjiang, but none of that is particularly new. It feels, in fact, like old news simply because it's been with us for a long time now. Isn't the NBA and what's been happening with the Chinese tennis star Peng Shui more relevant or at least more immediate catalysts? How much do you think that played into the U.S.'s decision?
I think the Peng Shui situation is really important in a number of ways. First of all, it really raised the profile of what's happening in China right now. Second of all, it was a harbinger possibly of what could happen to an athlete should they have the temerity to speak out against what's happening in China, against any official, and maybe even against the International Olympic Committee and the Olympics. In responding to the situation with the tennis player, the International Olympic Committee very much took the side of Chinese authorities, sending a signal to athletes that in reality, when it comes to the clutch in the prime Olympic moment, the International Olympic Committee might not have your back as an athlete. And so that would be pretty jarring if you were thinking about going to Beijing as an Olympic athlete and perhaps making a stand about something that mattered to you politically. The IOC has signaled that it really doesn't have your back, despite its slogans like athletes come first. When it comes to Peng Shui, they've believed everything that the Chinese authorities have said. They haven't asked for verification. They haven't asked for safe passage out of the country. And those are all big signals to athletes who are headed to Beijing.
Yeah, so it's kind of a warning to any of the Olympians who do go there and perhaps want to take advantage of that moment to really make clear their point of view on what's going on in China. China has also vowed to take countermeasures. We don't know what that means yet, and of course they've kept it vague. The U.S., we know, will host the 2028 Olympic Games in L.A. Would it be too far out for China to say something about that right now?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. That's one possibility, sort of a tit for tat, talking just Olympics only. But China has a lot of possibilities at its disposal. The United States is quite reliant on China economically at this point. And so we'll see what they decide to do. Let's not forget that the United States is no stranger to humanitarian crises. I'm coming to you from the west coast of the United States, where homelessness is a humanitarian crisis in plain sight. Then there's Guantanamo, there's family separation at the border. And so I expect all of those topics to come into the conversation when China pushes back against the government of the United States saying things to Beijing right now.
Yeah, accusing the U.S. of crimes against humanity and human rights abuses. There are plenty of examples there if you consider what we just discussed now. Well, we know the Olympics are supposed to be apolitical, but come on, that's never been the case from the beginning of time. Give us a few of the most recent examples in which it's clear just how political the Olympics have become.
Well, the Olympics were political from day one when a plucky baron from France, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, started the Olympics. He brought together powerful political people from around the world to create the International Olympic Committee. He was quite straightforward about the fact that he needed political support for his games. It's been political all the way through 1936 when Berlin hosted the Olympics and the Nazis created the Olympic torch run as a way of not only getting the Olympic spirit throughout Germany, but also as a way to sort of scout out possible invasions that happened in the wake of those 1936 Olympics. Fast forward to more current times and look at the 2014 Olympics in Sochi, where you had anti-LGBTQ laws passed immediately ahead of those Olympics, and a lot of athletes wanting to speak out about that. Pretty much every single Olympics has political elements to it. And if somebody tells you otherwise, there's a good chance that they're milking the Olympic machine with both hands, meaning they're making their money off of the Olympic Games. Anybody who looks at the Olympics objectively will see immediately that they're thrumming with the political.
That's a great synopsis there of the history of how the Olympics have always been political. So looking ahead, Professor Boycott, what do you see as the next step? How else might China position itself before the 2022 Games?
Well, for starters, next step, we'll see who joins the United States in a diplomatic boycott. Second, we have to keep an eye on whether that eventually swerves into the possibility of an athlete boycott. That still remains to be seen. That would be a whole different kettle of fish right there.
Do you expect that? Is that likely?
I do not believe that is likely. I think a lot of people inside of the Olympic sphere were very much scarred by the double boycotts of 1980 and 1984. Many of those athletes have been outspoken in having to live with an asterisk by their name where it says Olympian asterisk because they didn't actually get to participate. And so I think their pushback has been so vociferous that I wouldn't expect an athlete boycott. But hey, if things are difficult to predict, we wouldn't have predicted coronavirus. We wouldn't have necessarily predicted a lot of what's happened in the last couple of years. So anything's really possible in the next couple months.
All right. Professor Jules Boycott, thank you so much. Pacific University Professor of Government and Politics. We'll be checking in with you as we get closer to the 2022 Olympic Games in Beijing. This is Bloomberg Quicktake. Thanks for joining us.